The wife wants me to build a cabinet, as we have these books, remotes, and whatever this thing is that needs a place to call home. But not just any cabinet. She wants a robot, and has requested 2 hidden features, but more on that later. I couldn't help but think of a 1950s style television when picturing the design for this robot. The wife, though, was picturing this picture that she found online. So the final design is going to be a blend of the 2 ideas, but we'll touch more on that as we go. We are going to be building this robot with free wood, not to be confused with pallet wood, which at one time this was a temporary workbench for. I'll let you in on a little secret. Nothing in life is actually free, especially when it comes to wood. I got this door from my in-laws in exchange for marrying their daughter. Well, no, but also technically true. I just didn't know it at the time, and it's more relevant than you think. If you're wondering, why am I cutting down this door on a concrete floor? Well, this is a little bit of editing magic. This is me, but at the start of my YouTube journey. And like an amateur, I forgot to record the actual cutting down of this door. You know that saying, when life gives you lemons, make apple pie. Well, when life gives you a free door, make robot furniture. I'm constantly reminded that I no longer live in Oregon and now reside in Texas because of things like humidity, which can quickly cause a fresh cut board to develop a twist. At this moment, I realized that this project is going to be more complicated than I wanted it to be, because we now need to figure out how we want to remove the twist. Right away, the wife suggested cutting the wood down to fit in our thickness planner. I hesitated at this idea, partly because it came from the wife. I'm just joking. Also, not really. But also because it sounded like more work than I wanted to do. You know the saying, excuses are like but apple calyx. We all know one when we hear one, and some days we are one, if we don't lie to ourselves. In saying that, this was me over a year ago. Back then, I lived with the mentality of what is a push stick and how dangerous can I make this cut? Know that I am a changed person, and any suspicious behavior that you see today is not an endorsement of said behavior. The outer frame of this door is about 2 inches thick, and I need to cut that in half, as I want to be able to get as much lumber from this door as possible. This would probably be safer to do on a bandsaw, or at the very least, I could have created a jig to make these cuts safer. I know to some people, free wood has a negative connotation, but there are some benefits to it. In my ignorance, I thought mahogany was ugly and outdated, and that would have never changed if I didn't decide to take this free wood. Milling wood is a task in woodworking that I don't like. And I especially don't like the disaster it makes. Let me know in the comments what tasks you do that you despise while you're doing it, but love it when it's over, whether it's woodworking related or not. Now that our betrothed lumber is prepared, we can actually start the building process. This robot is going to have 2 sections, a head and a body. Both sections are going to be built the same, with one being smaller and one being taller. The biggest difference is one will have a drawer and one will have a door. It's going to make more sense as we go. I know butt joints can get a bad rep sometimes, due to a question of their strength and appearance, but everything has a time and a place. I want the robot to look boxy, as we're aiming for this 1950s aesthetic. To add strength to the joints, we are going to reinforce the robot with some screws. I marked the location of the holes to give it a uniform look, and to show that I am not a complete amateur. But don't let a good moment distract you from the failure to come. I can be reckless when building things. As a result, I broke my drill bit, and now I don't have any drill bit smaller than 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to use a rabbiting bit to create a slight inset in the body and the head of the robot. From a design standpoint, I want the door and the drawer to be slightly proud of the surface. Like, dude, seriously, what are you doing? I eventually realized that I don't have enough support to properly use the router. Better to be slow to wisdom than have no wisdom at all. So I grabbed some scrap wood and clamped it to the wood. This was a sad attempt. One clamp wasn't going to do it. I did say slow to wisdom. After thinking this through, I got some double-sided tape and taped the scrap wood to the robot. This made the job a lot easier and safer to do. Also, a quick PSA. Don't wear long sleeves that dangle in the workshop. This is an accident just waiting to happen. Now, back to our normally scheduled video. Before I could be done for the night and clean out any dust from my crack, I still need to glue up the wood that's going to be acting as the back panel for the robot.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
I don't know if what I'm doing would be considered a butt joint or not, as I decided to be ignorant of the technical name for this. Some days it's just not worth the Google. Or as my mama might say, a DuckDuckGo. That is a real search engine. Google it if you don't believe me. At one point off camera, the wife came back to check on me and asked me an important question.
Why are you just taping the back panels to the boxes?
To hold it in place while the glue dried, was my answer. This was not a good enough answer, so I went ahead and decided on my own to drill some holes and add some more screws, per her request. Some days you're good at what you do, other days you just get lucky. Most days, my methods are just questionable. I filled all the drill holes with an oak dowel. This was a tedious process, and I did not like it. However, it does provide a nice design aesthetic, as it looks like rivets on a robot. Except for the bottom of the robot, that got these pocket hole dowels, as they are trash. What you're about to witness is what we call in the biz, a happy accident. I know it looks like I'm just gluing two boards together, but there's more here than meets the eye. Let me know when you spot it, as I didn't spot it till the project was over. A bottle of CA glue was the perfect size to act as a template for shaping the drawer fronts. I used my sander to add the curve, but it wasn't until the last curve that I realized I was wasting sandpaper, and then realized I should have been removing the majority of the material with the pull saw before sanding to the pencil line. I do a lot of trash talking to 1-year-old me in this video, and at times for good reasons. Foam on top of granite is not a terrible idea, but just because it's not a terrible idea doesn't make it a good one. Like not clamping down an item when you're trying to add a round over. No bueno. So when I am trying my best, I like to give myself a little bit of credit. Foam did come in handy when drilling holes for the door pulls. Now a drawer face is pretty useless without a drawer box. We're not going to do anything fancy here. I'm going to go ahead and use some scrap 1/2-inch plywood to make the box. I added a dado groove to the drawer bottom to challenge myself a little bit, but I also just used pocket holes to assemble the drawer box, so yeah. Like butt joints, pocket holes get looked down on by some in the woodworking community. You could use a fancier joinery method to make this drawer box, but unless you made all the cabinets in your house yourself, I'm pretty sure you have some drawers that are being held together by glue and staples. So pocket holes are more than fine for this project. When a robot is an empty kettle, he should be on his mettle, and yet he's torn apart, just because he's presuming that he could be human. If he only had a heart. I may not be the great and powerful Wizard of Oz, but I am going to give this robot a heart with a special meaning, which we'll talk more about later. First, we need to create a place to hold the heart. The body of this robot is going to have a drop-down shaker-style cabinet door. It's a classic look to me that I want in this robot. And to accomplish this, we're going to continue with butt joints as the joinery method. As it's gotten us this far in the build, what can I say? I like butt joints and I cannot lie. All you other woodworkers can't deny. We aren't going to cut any tenons or grooves, but just gluing up the boards would make for a weak joint. So we're going to use some pocket holes. Nah, I'm playing. We're going to go ahead and use some dowels to strengthen the connection. It will also make for an easier glue up when you do it right. That being said, I made this glue up harder than it needed to be. It's always a good idea to test fit things before adding glue. I didn't do that, and the dowels I bought were a little bit thicker than the holes I drilled. So I went ahead with the blunt force method, which normally works almost 100% of the time. But this time, we were on the other side of it working. Moments like this force you to problem solve before the glue can cure. A screw and a vice grip solved the problem here, and I gained a little wisdom. I believe that's called a moral victory. But after all that, the glue up was an easy process. I mean, I did run into a small problem. I made the door too big, not a big problem, but a mistake nonetheless.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Using a push stick here would have been a really smart move. It only took me a year after this to actually make one, and to clean up all this mess. As the saying goes, don't confuse me with the measurements my mind made up. Now that we fixed our mistakes, we can go ahead and add some finishing touches to the cabinet door. I went quickly to the pole saw this time around, and then I could sand the corners to match the inset of the robot body. I'm going to use the rabbit bit again to add, well, a rabbit to the door. This is where the robot's heart will call home. As it says in the book of Proverbs, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. Learn from my foolishness. Knowledge gained from the mistakes of others is cheaper than learning it on your own. And whatever you do, keep Will Smith's wife's name out your mouth. I don't always use hand tools, but when I do, you can be sure I'm going to tell you all about it. That's got to be like the woodworking version of that vegan joke. How do you know somebody's vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you about it. A simple box can look very nice, but a box with rounded corners makes for a much better design. I think the router might be my favorite tool. Whether it's flush trimming or adding some sweet roundovers, the router just adds that little bit of touch to make a project go from good to great. We went ahead and tested the door and the hinges, and everything worked perfectly. And by that, I mean the door didn't want to close and the screws were too long. But other than that, everything's great. I don't know why the door didn't want to close, but I do know that changing the orientation of the hinges didn't help. Then I had a thought that I can only describe as coming from the wisdom of God, because it clearly didn't come from me.
Maybe I need to cut this at an angle. I'm just trying to figure out what angle to cut it at.
I cut the bottom of the door at a slight angle and switched the hinges back to their original orientation. And it worked. Problem solved. You're going to have to trust me on this because at the moment I know you can't see it, but you will.
Shut, baby.
For the screws being too long, I did try to file them down at first and then switched to using a hacksaw. Not a terrible idea, but I don't know why back then I had an issue with clamping things to a work surface. Apparently, I wanted to work harder and not smarter. This brings us to a hidden feature of the robot. It's the manner in which we're going to connect the robot's head to its body. We're going to use this Lazy Susan right here to allow the robot to spin its head. When it's attached, it's going to spin much better once attached. Look, I'm not going to make up some goofy reason why this is important. I could, but I'm not going to. It serves no real purpose, but cool and fun are always welcome on this channel. To be able to attach the head to Susan, I need to drill some holes in the robot body, but the actual attachment of the head will be done later. Have you ever wondered why it's called a Lazy Susan? I have, yet never cared to DuckDuckGo it till now. And the answer might just surprise you. No one knows for sure. Anticlimactic? Yes. But I will tell you one popular theory. It is said that Thomas Jefferson invented it for his daughter, named Susan, who often complained that she would be the last one to be served at the dinner table. I have a teenage daughter myself, so this sounds very plausible. I was planning on using my CNC to cut out the parts for the arms and the hands, but I broke my router bit that I needed for this. So I turned to the laser, which I knew wasn't powerful enough to cut through this 1/2-inch mahogany. I did 6 passes and I only got about halfway through. So this led me to my jigsaw table. I cut as close as I could to the burn lines. Then I used the router table to flush cut all the edges. What would have been smarter is using the laser to create templates to make the arm pieces. But I decided again, working harder was the better idea. So yeah, creating a template would have been better and faster. I'm pretty sure that you've heard the saying that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. This time, the laser did a better job of cutting through the oak for the robot hands. It did leave a lot of burnt edges, but I always planned on staining the hands black, so no harm, no foul. I glued all the pieces together in a simple design. This one piece gets glued into this other piece, then these smaller pieces get glued into these other pieces. Like I said, simple. Then I went ahead and used an overpriced stain, which I don't regret buying at all. While we're on the topic of things that I regret buying, these legs. Let me just say, I don't recommend these legs. They aren't bad per se, but they did require me to bore out multiple holes in the bottom of the robot, as you have to screw a metal plate to each of the legs, leaving you with screws that are proud of the surface. When you expect a task to take less than 30 minutes, and then it takes over 2 hours, that's never a good experience. The legs worked out fine, and from a design standpoint, look great. I'm just not happy with the extra steps I had to do to attach them, and that's partly on me for not reading the description fully before I purchased it. When it comes to applying finish, preparation goes a long way in making sure your piece comes out perfect. Well, at the very least, as good as you can do. The finish we're using today is Danish oil. As I said before, in my mind, when I started working on this piece, I thought, ugh, mahogany. Oh, how wrong I was. The finish made this color pop, and I'm just going to stop talking now. Now that the finish is dry, it's time to do like the Avengers and assemble. We went ahead and added Susan back to the body of the robot and used those holes we drilled earlier to attach Susan to the head. Adding it at this point wasn't a mistake, but it was definitely premature. We still need to add the drawer slides to the robot head. And because of Susan, I had to hold the head in place the whole time. So yet again, I found myself making a step more work than it needed to be. Don't worry, those aren't the eyes of the robot, but a temporary clamp to attach the face to the drawer box. And a way for me to know where I need to drill out the holes for the eyes later. We bought a ridiculous amount of Chicago screws for the moving parts of the robot arm. There is no way that I can explain how we determined where the arms needed to be located. 1, because it was over a year ago, and 2, because we just winged it.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
We kind of did a dry run, and from there we figured out one side and then just mimicked that on the other side of the robot. In woodworking, just like much in life, you can either have it cheap, fast, or good, but you cannot have all three. We went ahead and just used CA glue to attach the hands to the cabinet doors. So we went with cheap and fast. This was a quick solution to get the project done-ish on time for a special day. More on this shortly. Well, in a year or so, technically.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
To protect the robot heart, we're going to sandwich it between 2 sheets of acrylic. To add an additional design element, we went ahead and lasered and spray painted cogs on the back panel of acrylic. So me and a plan only works out about half of the time. In saying that, you should instantly know this was not one of those times.
Oh, you're idiots.
Are you kidding me?
Our first problem was we glued the plywood heart upside down. To add insult to injury, when taking out the heart, I put my dirty sausage fingers all over the acrylic sheet. There was also some glue drops as well, so we went ahead and tried to clean it off, but we just made it worse. So the decision was made to just break out the acrylic sheet, and now we're just going to use one. To keep the trend going from earlier, we decided to go cheap and fast when securing the robot heart, which is also known as hot glue. After a year, it's holding up. Well, we'll address this shortly. To further enhance the design of this robot, we ordered these black and gold knobs with a diamond pattern to act as his eyes. And then we were done. This is actually a project that I released over a year ago. That video is currently unlisted, as it wasn't my best work. Cheap and fast now needs to be upgraded to cheap and good. First, we need to address the hands. My first thought was to use a hydraulic drop-down hinge, but the wife vetoed that idea, as it didn't look, and I quote, pretty. The best idea that I could come up with was using some brackets. Now, the problem with this is the spacing between the door and the cabinet doesn't allow for this. I'm prone to getting a project finished enough to be usable, but not quite fully complete. This robot deserves better from me. First, I needed to gently remove the hand that wasn't broken at the time. The key word there is at the time. This was my best attempt at being gentle. I'm sure there was a better way of doing this, but what's done is done. I thought about rebuilding the hands, but ultimately decided to just notch out some of the wood in the door frame for brackets. Could I have just used this beautiful chisel and not removed the hand? Possibly. I didn't actually think of that, and I probably should have. But that's in hindsight. And in my mind, this was the only way to do it at the time. At the end of the day, the slots for the brackets have been cut out, and I used 2 different types of hand tools in this video. So I think that officially makes me a woodworker now. Maybe. Probably not. Yeah, this hand has seen a lot of CA glue over the year. Next, I could go ahead and fix the hand that I personally broke. While the glue is drying on the hands, we need to go ahead and address the broken heart this robot has. With the help of my laser, I created these brackets to be able to hold the robot heart in place. These will be screwed in place, but first we need to drill some oversized holes using the templates as a drill guide. While doing this may look like I'm going to make a horrible mistake. This isn't foreshadowing. It may seem sketchy using the cabinet door as a work surface, but I made sure to drill slowly to just get past the acrylic. And then I could go ahead and finish the holes in the plywood on some scrap wood. To reattach this hand back to the cabinet door, I used wood glue and black CA glue. And I kind of used the CA glue as a welding joint to hold everything together. Since this is a robot, we're just going to act like this ugly CA glue weld was on purpose, and not because of my original, poorly constructed design. Before we can add any screws, we need to address a serious problem that this robot has: ashiness. I broke out my homemade beeswax and a white non-scratch pad and brought this wood back to life. I don't know if this comes across on the camera, but it's a major difference. I let everything cure and dry overnight, as I waited a year at this point. What's one more day? So there's one more issue that we need to address. There is no handle to open the drop-down door, and the wife doesn't want one on her robot. So I purchased this single touch latch to solve this problem. I cut out a piece of acrylic as a spacer to raise the metal plate, as otherwise the door would stick out further than we wanted it to be when using the latch. Getting it attached was interesting, but we figured it out with that age-old trick called winging it. And it was perfect, at least for what we wanted. Have you noticed that woodworking makes you a hoarder? Not just of scrap wood, but of things like screws. Some organized better than others. I like the design element of having these shiny screw heads that are also smooth to hold down the corner brackets. To me, it just gives more of a robot feel. When attaching the hand bracket, it was slightly annoying to find the right angle to pre-drill some holes and attach the screws. This brings us to the last hidden feature that we're going to add to this project: a rechargeable, motion-detected LED light, so that the robot will both have a heart and give off a warm feeling. Because the last thing you want is a cold-hearted robot looking over you while you sleep. And then I could finish reassembling the robot. Now he is ready to be reintroduced to the world. Do you remember when I was talking about a happy accident with the drawer front? That looks like a robot mouth. Look at that smile on my boy's face. If you didn't know any better, you might think I did this on purpose. I did not. I just glued up the panel and forgot to remove equal amounts of wood from both sides of the board when cutting it down. Thankfully, I decided to marry my wife. And because of that, I got this door, which I think was an amazing deal. Little did I know it would one day turn into an anniversary gift. We got married on May 4th because she is the biggest Star Wars fan I know, regardless if she says the day is just a coincidence. As we know, there is no such thing as coincidence. I hope you enjoyed the video. May the 4th be with you. I'm Joseph with 5 Dope Studio. Hope to see you next time. Wouldn't be the same without you.